immediately that it's the product of intelligent design, right? The molecules didn't fly up and all assemble themselves into a car. So that's the universe. Now along comes Dan Dennett, who says, wait a minute, I want to show you the wheels of this car. These are the different life forms. And I want to show you that one life form, in other words, the life forms can be produced without external intervention. They operate according to natural forces that are within the car, meaning within the universe. I would argue, so? The evolution of the part in no way refutes the intelligent design of the whole. So if the universe as a whole requires explanation, Dan says it doesn't need explanation. Even David Hume, the great skeptic, says we can never say anything so ridiculous as to posit an effect without a cause. So the universe, I would submit, with all its laws, does require some ultimate explanation. We can't just, we would be really ignoramuses if we just said, well, it's just there. Imagine if you use that explanation for other things. The crater, it's just there. The dead actress who's been found in Hollywood, the head just appeared. No one really did it. No detective work is necessary. It doesn't need a cause. Well, it does need a cause, and if you're going to posit a cause, the most reasonable cause is to posit an intelligent designer that made it that way.
Hi, this question's for Professor D'Souza. You maintain that the Big Bang must have had a cause, as you've been going on and on. However, this, in effect, created the universe that is grounded in such rules of cause and effect. Yet, at the same time, you also maintain that, as humans, we are creatures of free will and choice, and therefore are exempt from this universal canon of cause and effect. Does this not strike you as a gross inconsistency, at best?
On the contrary, it is completely consistent with my supposition, let's call it a hypothesis, that a discretionary God who did not have to make the universe was not created out of necessity. It was created out of free, at least this is the Christian view, out of free will. We are created in the image of God, which means that to some degree we have some resemblance to God. In what way? What resemblance? Well, God's not a material thing. There's no Christian tradition going back to the beginning that holds God to be God's spiritual. So we don't resemble God in our material frame. That's why I have no problem with the theory of evolution, because I think that the material frame of man can be adequately explained by evolution. But I maintain that man also has a moral and a spiritual dimension, and while evolution has made pretty good headway in explaining what could be called low altruism, I scratch your back, you scratch my back, or the mother jumps in the burning car because, wait a minute, her children happen to share her genes, that's why she's doing it, disguised selfishness. This is all very clever, but frankly it doesn't go very far. It accounts for about 10% of morality. If you get up and give your seat in a bus to a stranger, you know, Richard Dawkins may come and go, well, that was a very cunning move. You're hoping the old lady will give you her seat next week. No, you're just doing it because you're a nice guy. Or you give blood, or Mother Teresa, or give me liberty or give me death. There are lots of people who do things for strangers where they have no even disguised benefit. And I think evolution has not actually given a very plausible, it's given some implausible accounts of this, but it hasn't really accounted for morality, and I think it's that many people would admit that.
We're going to go till about 9:15, but in this segment, we're going to have each of the debaters respond for a maximum of 1 minute. Thank
you. Dinesh, the 10% that you think is explained, you're just not looking at the 90% of the rest of the work. You're offering caricatures of the work that's actually being done on the evolution of morality. And, you know, I've written quite a bit about this, and you can read my books and find there much more interesting, much more compelling, and more persuasive facts. It isn't all just you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. It's not all just looking out for your genes. The work that's being done does promise to provide a complete account of the genesis of morality. That does not, however, provide an account of why, you know, which aspects of this we endorse. That is not a job for science. That's a job for a political discussion.
Thank you.
We've heard a lot tonight about the crimes of other messianic ideologies such as Nazism or communism, but I'd like to hear what both of the speakers think of Scandinavia, which happens to have 70% atheists or agnostics and happens to have the highest human development in the world. And why would we be opposed to acknowledge that, yeah, we had a Christian tradition, but we move beyond that and we take care of our own. They give the most to charity. They have the lowest crime rate. I mean, you could go on and how they outperform America on just about everything, and they're agnostic and atheist.
I'm glad you raised that point. When I planted my hayfield some years back, my neighbor said, well, you want to plant oats as a nurse crop. I said, what's a nurse crop? He said, well, it comes up first and it protects the Timothy, the hay. Then once the hay gets a good start, it protects it against weeds and against insects and so forth. Then you can cut the oats, you can harvest it as you want, but it's something that comes up first and provides a scaffolding and a protection. And I think of religion as a sort of nurse crop. I think that Dinesh is probably right, that much of what we value in secular 21st century America has its roots in Christian, for instance, traditions that helped to foster attitudes which led to the scientific revolutions of the 17th and later centuries that led to our principles of democracy and freedom and so forth. And I think we can be very grateful for the religious contributions to that. But now I think it's time for us to grow up. I think we've outgrown the need for this nurse crop, and we can carry on in a secular country. And I think the Scandinavian countries are a perfect example of that.
I'm actually going to go back and read Dan's books, because I do want to learn more about the evolutionary arguments about morality, and I hope to learn from them, as I've learned from your other books as well. I do want to urge you to do something as well, and that is to take seriously an argument that was made by the philosopher Nietzsche. Now, Nietzsche is perhaps the great atheist thinker of the last 100 years. And he argued as follows. He said there are many people in the West who want to have it both ways. They want to kill God, but they want to keep Christian morality. In other words, Christianity brought in things into the world that weren't there before, and Nietzsche, as an expert on ancient Greece and Rome, knew this. There was very little value in human life in ancient Greece and Rome. And the Spartans notoriously left the sick child on the hillside to die in the cold. So the preciousness of every human life, that's a Christian idea. Nietzsche knew that, but he didn't like the idea. The equality of men and women, or the equality of the races, another Christian idea. Again, Nietzsche had serious reservations about it. He thought that woman, for example, was inferior to man, and he has some of the most misogynistic statements in Western literature. So here's Nietzsche's point. Nietzsche's point is many people think you can kill God, but keep all those nice things that came into the world because of the Christian God. Nietzsche says that's an illusion. If you kill God, all those other things go too. And he predicted the 20th century would be a century of great wars, great conflicts, the fraying of the value of human life along the edges, both at the beginning, abortion, and at the end, infanticide, euthanasia. He said these ideas will all make a comeback. He was for it, but he was also prophetic. We have been seeing that happen. So I would just suggest that if you like equality, you like human dignity, you like compassion, be a little careful before pompously announcing, oh yeah, we'll cut off the roots and keep the branches and so on. That doesn't really work in nature, and Nietzsche argues it doesn't really work in civilization either.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sorry I have